can I please welcome to the stage then Dean Gardner from Softcat, and also, have you got Tim Hearn from VMware with you? Yeah, Tim Hearn. Right. That's great. And you're going to tell us about the VMware-AWS partnership that hopefully is of great interest to all of us here.
That's the aim.
Thank you.
Morning. Yeah, long title, but essentially that's what we're going to be talking about. VMware and AWS partnering with us, Softcat, in higher education. This is who we are. My name's Dean Gardner. I'm Chief Technologist for Cloud at Softcat. Softcats are a company that's been around for about 25 years. We're a reseller, solutions integrator, managed service provider. And we have been working with VMware for quite a few months now on this proposition. We're one of the early adopters in terms of a partner, and we were doing this before it was actually announced and released in the UK in May. Tim is with me, and I'll let him introduce himself when he comes on. I'll be talking for a couple of minutes about why Softcat think it's important to look at this particular technology and where we see it playing. And then Tim will go into a bit more details as to the business benefits, how it relates to you, and a bit more about the technology itself. And I'll come back at the end, Q&A, and obviously if you've got any questions about it, we can go technical or we can go business. That's why we're both here. So I suppose any deep dive technical questions, I'm here to help. And we'll be around for a few hours outside if you want to ask any additional questions, if you don't feel comfortable asking questions in front of the audience. So, Softcat, VMware Premier Partner, that's what we do. We're obviously other partners as well. We do a lot of stuff, but VMware is where we do a lot of our work. On-premise data centers predominantly are run as a hypervisor with VMware technology. And essentially what's happening in the world, obviously of multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, organizations are looking at those data centers and where they can run, and obviously where they can run, people are considering AWS and other cloud platforms. But that brings its own challenges, just moving your workloads out to the likes of AWS as much as it can work. If you're still running a lot of on-premise or in the campus technology, being able to integrate that and work with native AWS services isn't as easy as it sounds, and in some cases can end up costing a lot more money. So VMware, 18 months ago, partnered with AWS from a strategic point of view and started building essentially their technology that sits in AWS data centers. And so if you're not sure what the technology is, it's basically bare metal, it's physical tin that is provisioned as a cluster in AWS regions globally. And obviously what you can do is plug your on-premise VMware platform quite seamlessly into that technology. So this is an AWS service. This is not AWS running the service. This is a VMware run service. VMware provide this service as a managed service 24/7, 365. They look after the infrastructure. All the licensing is included. And essentially you as operators see it as another site, but you don't actually look after the infrastructure. So it's quite compelling to then plug it into essentially what you're doing on-premise. I've seen organizations consider moving everything out to AWS or VMware and AWS and taking away the data centers. And we're talking to some organizations who are considering that today. So Softcat, we're fully accredited across the suite of stuff that's available. vSphere, NSX, vSAN. If you're going hyper-converged, we do that as well. We were one of the first partners to be accredited on VMware Cloud and AWS. And in higher education, I believe we're the #1 UK partner for VMware as well. In addition, we are on all the frameworks. So this is kind of the boring stuff, but if you do want to procure stuff for us, and if you do already, then great. Some of you think that we're just a licensing reseller, and we are, but we do this stuff. So we do solutioning. We come in, we run workshops, and we work with you to determine where this stuff is going to work for your business or where it's not going to work for your business, because ultimately it may not be suitable. But I'll hand over to Tim to sort of crack on, and I'll come back at the end and talk about how Softcat can partner with VMware to understand your business better or understand what you're trying to do from a higher education point of view and see if this is relevant. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dean. Mic okay? Good. Morning, everybody. So I've tried very hard not to make this a solutions pitch or a product pitch because it's a Friday, it's been a long week, and we want to go home at some point as well. So what I've tried to do is to marry what we're doing with VMware and AWS in a partnership to one of the challenges that we see quite a lot in industry, and certainly we see within university campuses, and that is that many heads of IT find that they've lost a lot of control of IT because other parts of the university have set up their own shadow IT environment. And that's all very well because you've got a huge amount of innovation within the university, huge amount of IQ within the university that can come up with some amazing ideas. But what's really difficult is actually harnessing that at a university level to be able to bring the full benefit of that to the university. So I've tried to kind of marry the two things. We'll see if it works. You can tell me later. And I'm using some content from a book from Geoffrey Moore. So if anybody's read one of Geoffrey's books before, he wrote Crossing the Chasm. So if you remember that book, it was around how startups move from being a startup into a large organisation, and the challenges of making that gap, that leap across the chasm from startup, small to medium enterprise into a larger organisation. And this is a more recent book, but it's actually much more focused on how do large, mature organisations transform themselves into a digital environment and into the digital era. So it's not a thick book. You can read it in about 3 or 4 hours, depending on how quickly you read. It's worth a read, actually. But the reason I've taken for that is he talks about these 4 zones of innovation and talking from ideas to execution. And I find this particularly useful, and it resonates a lot when we're talking about DevOps and shadow IT and corporate IT and how to bring those things together. So if you look at the bottom left-hand side, the incubation zone, this is typically the shadow IT DevOps guys that are doing coding. There may be researchers that are developing code and IT to be able to support their research projects. There are student groups that's doing ethical hacking, hopefully it will be ethical hacking. But there's all different parts of the university and companies that are doing bits of coding and bits of development work. And there's some fantastic new ideas coming in here because they're typically millennials that are coming in with no preconceived ideas, come up with some really amazing things. And the key thing within that shadow IT is how do you harness the best of those ideas and the best of that functionality to move up into the transformation zone to be able to create digital services and cloud apps. And this is how people like Facebook started. Yeah. Small university project that then blossomed into something bigger, get some funding, make it scalable, come into something which is globally impactful. And so this is the world of shadow IT on the left-hand side, and we see that across industries. So universities is an area where we see a lot of this happening, but we see it everywhere. But what that means is that the head of IT doesn't get to see any of this innovation, probably doesn't get to leverage any of that innovation, and it can duplicate or negatively impact what's going on in corporate IT. And at a vice chancellor level, if you're trying to bring all this stuff together and get the benefit out of it for the university, really hard job. On the right-hand side, you've got the underpaid, overworked, underrepresented corporate IT staff that work very, very hard to be able to keep the lights on and try to bring new ideas to the business. So the people within IT that are coming up with new ideas are trying to drive productivity and new capability out of the existing infrastructure and finding it difficult to be able to get the funding and the visibility, if you like, to be able to get this thing through. But they're working on really important things like digital security, single sign-on, bring your own device, collaborative tools, bringing more capability into desktops, bringing more capability onto interactive boards and things like that. So there's a lot of really good stuff that goes on in here, typically under-rewarded, but it's the engine room of corporate IT, and that comes up into major campus-wide projects that could be around student services, could be with collaboration, could be enterprise-wide IT projects, and desktop and mobility projects are typical in here. But the problem is that these two things are ships in the night, and it may be different in your universities, but what we tend to see is that the two don't tend to talk. The two tend not to like each other very much either in a lot of cases. The two try to avoid each other in a lot of cases. But what if you can bring the two sides together to be able to capture the complete IQ of the university to be able to holistically bring digital IT to the organisation? Very easy thing to say, a horrendously difficult thing to achieve. Now, part of that is organisationally, or an organisational problem, which is not something that a technologist or a technology company can solve, although that we can help to facilitate a university bringing those organisations together. And the work that VMware is doing with AWS, I think, is a really good tool to be able to help heads of IT, vice chancellors, to be able to look at how do we try and harness the value of both of these domains and communities. And that's where the relationship comes in. So this relationship is about 3 years old now. We launched our first joint data center last summer, but we'd been working on it for 18 months, 2 years before. So it's a jointly engineered endeavor. It's a global project. We have data centers now in London. We'll have Dublin by Christmas. But there are 7 data centers around the world. And the plan is that every data center that AWS owns will have this VMware capability embedded in it within the next 12 months. So if you've got overseas campuses, then you can make use of those data centers in regions. And effectively what we're trying to do is to be able to say, let's take the leader of on-prem data center infrastructure, who really understands corporate IT, has been working with corporate IT for years, and marry that to the funky AWS guys over here that have a lot of creativity and 140 services, I think, that are now available on native AWS, and try and bring those two things together. And this relationship is working fantastically well. I would say that because I'm responsible for it in the UK within VMware. But I've been in IT for 30 odd years. I've not had as much fun as when I was an apprentice in IBM quite a long time ago. And that's because we're really doing some quite different things, and it's having an impact on the customers that we're working with. So what does this thing look like? So from an architecture point of view, this is about as technical as I'm going to get. So there's no boxes and wires in here. I do have a background in Juniper and Cisco, but I'm going to stay away from the networking piece today. But if you are used to recognize a campus data center over here for the university, if in VMware world that comprises virtualized compute, virtualized networking, virtualized storage, doesn't have to, but certainly virtualized compute. And corporate IT have built up a lot of skill in this area about building private clouds where you've got self-service, you're able to stand up compute very, very quickly. It's a very reliable infrastructure. It's a well-known and well-skilled environment. And what we're doing with VMware Cloud on AWS is everything that you have on the left-hand side is replicated over here, but instead of it sitting on infrastructure that you buy every 3 years and have to do hardware refreshes on a regular basis and have to implement that stuff and go through that implementation cycle, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You put your compute, storage, and virtualized networking into VMware Cloud on AWS. It's running the latest versions of software on all of that. It sits on a bare metal platform that's resilient and encrypted, and you run it from your university in the same way that you run your on-prem. So when you look at it on screen, it looks exactly the same. The only thing different, it's physically not on the university campus. But the nice thing about this is you're married up to all these AWS 140 services, I think they run. And if you're in that VMware on Cloud on AWS environment that you own and run, VMware run it for you at an infrastructure level, you own and manage it from a management and operations and application level, then you have the choice of being able to include any AWS services into that stack. So you can overlay lots of other new innovation. There's a 25 gig free connection between the AWS side and the VMware side. So you can now look at things like expanding your storage from your VMware environment out into Amazon Elastic Block Storage. So if you've got a SAN refresh coming up, don't go and buy SAN. If you're running it in here, all you do is you expand straight out into this storage capability here and you pay for it on demand. Or you've got a DR capability, then use Amazon S3 buckets to be able to provide your DR capability. So you just push it out from VMware into Amazon and you run it in that way. Or if you want to reduce your dependency on Oracle for database services, start to look at Amazon's RDS, their relationship database service. And you can run Amazon now RDS on VMware on-prem, so you can now take that database and run it over there on-prem. You can run it in VMC on AWS, and you can run it on here. So you can start to do some really creative things that you probably couldn't do if you were running on campus. You know, it wouldn't make any sense to expand your VMware environment over here into EBS when you've got a big network in the middle to work with in terms of latency, bandwidth, cost. Even if you've got Janet, you've still got those network issues to overcome. So the fantastic thing about this is you take all the benefits of your corporate IT or your skill sets in corporate IT, you bring it into proximity with your AWS domain where all your coders and your shadow IT are working. So for the first time ever, you physically got everything under one roof. So what we found, and we worked with some quite big industry players on this that had a shadow IT problem, a major bank in the city. For the first time ever, the CIO was able to get corporate IT and shadow IT round the table together to be able to say, right, you have this capability now. Figure out how you innovate across this boundary by putting new ideas and new capability onto the existing corporate IT infrastructure. Now, it needs driving, it needs to be owned and governed, but now, it's kind of interesting that you've actually got an infrastructure play that can help to facilitate an organizational shift within a company. So there's loads of things that we can talk about on here. I won't go into any more detail on it, except that it's everything you know about VMware. It's commercially a cloud proposition, so you can pay for it on demand if you want to, or you can pay for it up front, so it fits into CapEx and OpEx budgets. Excuse me. You get the latest and greatest of this. So we've got some customers that have actually got quite old VMware that find it difficult to be able to justify the expense of investing over here, but when you move it to here, we automatically upgrade you to everything new. So all your patching is managed for you. So as I said, well, it's a nice thing if you go back to Geoffrey Moore's model, and you might notice that I've flipped it around just to make it fit into my diagram. The right-hand side, your corporate IT guys, is working very hard to be able to help to transform the university. It's hard work, it's big, you've got a lot of legacy to work with, you've got a lot of dependencies to be able to work with. You can use VMware Cloud on AWS to take away some of that complexity, some of that legacy, to be able to make sure you've got the latest and greatest, but you're not diminishing all of the skill sets, resources, and capability you've got in corporate IT. And then you can use your funky DevOps guys when you can find them out there in schools and faculties, and maybe run some programs from corporate IT to be able to bring them together to be able to run innovation workshops, programs, initiatives, etc., to be able to start to look at how can I leverage the spend and increasing spend that you've got on AWS and here to be able to make more value of the corporate IT infrastructure that we have. Does that make sense? As I said, we have a data center in London. We have availability. The Amazon work on the concept of availability zone. So it's not a single data center; it's a cluster of data centers that's fully resilient. But we are planning on Dublin for Christmas, Paris next year. There's a number of APAC, so Tokyo, Sydney this year as well. So if you've got overseas campuses, then you can replicate this capability in other geographical locations as well. So from our point of view, this is going to come back to some of the things one of the things that VMware talks about at a corporate level. If you're really trying to drive a corporate business and get to be a digital business, then you need to harness the IT capabilities, not just of your corporate IT, but of the whole business, because everybody knows how to use an iPhone. Everybody's pretty good with IT these days. And the kids coming through the university that are coming into industry now know a hell of a lot more of it than we certainly do. So you need to start with the people and harness the value of the people, and then have a process in place to be able to bring that IQ together, and that helps you to deliver modern applications that makes use of the corporate data that you've got. But to be able to do that, you need these three things along the bottom, and I think most people forget about the fact that if you were trying to drive this, there's no point in having lots of little islands that don't join up together. You have to have some consistency of infrastructure, you have to have some consistency of operations, and you have to have security built into it. And just to round off, VMware Cloud on AWS is one of a number of cloud initiatives and cloud alliances that VMware has got. We're agnostic to cloud providers. The AWS relationship just happens to be a really successful and compelling one, but there are relationships with both Google and Microsoft in the cloud world, and IBM as well, for various different types of capability. But we think that this harnesses the power of both data center and cloud technologies together in a way that it's actually quite difficult to do in other ways, and to harness the collective talent of the organization. And when you look at the things that VMware does, whether that's modernizing data centers internally, extending out to cloud, which is this part of developing for cloud natively, which we're doing a lot around, particularly with Kubernetes at the moment, doing a lot of work in that area. We bought a company called Cloud Health recently that helps to integrate lots of different cloud providers together. And obviously we work with SaaS providers. In fact, if you look at our corporate IT infrastructure within VMware, it incorporates all of these things. I'll hand over back to Dean and then he can finish off, but I'll be out on the AWS and Softcat stand for the rest of the day. If you want to come and have a chat, it'd be great to talk to you. Thank you.
So just something really to think about as well, just as a follow-up. There is a way of trialing the service, so I think it's a 30-day platform usage, so you can actually plug it into your existing VMware environment. And the stack itself that runs in AWS it comprises of vSphere, NSX, and vSAN in a hyper-converged sense.
Yeah, there's some nice examples we can talk about around MIT in the US, who are moving hundreds of VMs a weekend over onto VMware Cloud on AWS. So actually there's quite a scalable way to be able to do the lift and shift of a fairly large infrastructure into this environment.
Yeah, so yeah, if you have connectivity, so if you have connectivity in place, obviously it works with IPsec VPN, it works with Direct Connect, or AWS Direct Connect if you've got one of those, and ultimately there's something called HCX, Hybrid Cloud Extender, which makes no sense because it's an X, not an E. But what you can do is vMotion, enhance vMotion. So you've used vMotion before if you're using VMware on-prem in your campus. You obviously just can click and migrate a VM from one cluster to another. Essentially, you can do something very similar. You can do it en masse. You can do bulk migrate, which is what you just described, to the platform that sits in AWS. So yeah, that's where organizations like Softcat come in. So we can obviously work with you to understand how you can do that, where it's relevant, and architect it accordingly. We have a framework that we follow. It starts obviously at Discover, where we can run workshops with you to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and obviously determine if this is going to be the right solution, because as much as it sounds great, it may not be the right solution. There are other solutions out there that might be more suitable, and obviously as a business we can also define some of that and build some business cases with you. We can also do the proof of concepts with you just to show the capabilities of a technology such as this. But obviously we fall right through into the design, deliver, operate and innovate, and we actually partner with Cloud Health as well. We started partnering with Cloud Health over a year ago to provide operational controls of cloud spend. So if you're using AWS or other cloud platforms, bridging those together, we see that as quite a big thing. And Cloud Health and our service, which is called Cloud Intelligence, is one of the areas that we can plug in that spend from something like VMware Cloud and AWS, and we can work as an aggregator of data to present that back to you so we can control and govern and help you do things better in a multi-cloud world. If you want to talk to me about the Cloud Intelligence service and Cloud Health, again, we're on the stand out there, we can talk to you how that all works with this solution. And we run workshops, cloud assessments. Obviously we can come in, work with you and do gap analysis against what you're doing today, what you're looking to do in future, and then we can write a nice report for you that can present back into your business to help you define that business case. The other thing we can do as well is build cost models for you. So the actual platform itself is pretty easy to cost against. It comes in a pay-as-you-go, a 1-year reserved or a 3-year reserved instance option. And obviously it's pretty straightforward to calculate. If you've already invested in VMware technology, if you have vSphere, if you have NSX or vSAN, there are discounts that apply. So if you obviously look at the cost model, you get discounts based on the commit. So if you want to talk to me about that or talk to Tim about that, we can go through that with you. And right now we can answer any questions you might have. And as I said, if you're not comfortable asking, please feel free to come out and ask some technical questions or business-related questions afterwards. Any questions about VMware Cloud and AWS? If you do want to go and see how much it costs, the URL's there. If you want to write that down or take a picture, you can go and do your own cost models against what you've got. And obviously if you want to go and log into the cloud portal or get access to it, you can just register and set your own account up. You can log in, and as Tim said, there are other services available on VMware Cloud. You'll be surprised how many services there are. I think there's about 19, 20 or something like that. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for today listening.